And welcome to today's Anticast. Thank you everyone for joining us today because we are we're graced. That's the word I'm looking for. We are graced with the presence of one Mr. Ben Bowman, who's got an insanely interesting topic for us today, which is exploiting AI. I hope you are ready. I hope you wore your seatbelt and your helmet because he's going to blow your mind and rip the doors off this thing because it's going to be a lot of fun. A topic that's very hot, very interesting for not just you folks out there, for me as well. So I'm looking forward to this. Ben, how are you doing today? And tell us a little bit about what we're going to learn.
That is a huge bar to live up to. I hope it's that good. I'm good. My name is Ben. I'm going to be teaching you guys about exploiting AI. This class is pretty straightforward as how it was designed. It was designed around MITRE's a framework for AI exploitation. So a lot of the topics are covered by MITRE. And what I'll do is talk about the attack, and then we'll talk about prevention. Like, how do we prevent this? I have a workshop coming up that this is kind of a prelude for, right? This is kind of getting your toe in the water. There's a GitHub that has hands-on labs, and we won't be doing any of the hands-on labs today, but should be good.
Yeah, it would be. This would be one heck of a webcast if we got all of this in the 1 hour time frame. I feel like that 1 hour is going to go fleeting by so very quickly. And that being said, let's jump right into it. You got a lovely slide deck waiting for us. Where do we begin when it comes to the topic of exploiting AI?
So let me move forward a little bit, but exploiting AI, everybody knows about prompt injection, right? So prompt injection is the first thing that comes to mind, and it's also the first thing in the MITRE attack framework. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But first, I want to step back a little bit and talk about what is AI. I know we've heard enough about that before, but it's kind of important to know how it works under the hood before you can attack something, right? The first step to exploitation is understanding how it works and then abusing how it works. So AI is, as you guys know, a lot of things, but the biggest one that we're going to be talking about is LLMs, right? So large language models are like ChatGPT, Llama, things that you can talk to. Um, they're also integrated into everything now, right? So it's becoming a larger attack surface. That's something that I really want to focus on is this is something that might not be huge yet, but I'm noticing on more tests, like internally, I'm seeing more and more AIs. And so it's important to add this to your tool set, I believe. It's going to become
Yeah,
more
and
popular and it's important to know.
and from what I've seen as well, and I'd love to get your take on this, is that people, because they have maybe some internal connection to X, Y, or Z AI, maybe they're using their own LLMs, whatever the case is, whatever access they have to whatever LLM or AI, they are putting some seriously sensitive information in there to get the answers that they need about X, Y, or Z problems or concepts they're trying to work their way through. And it can be a really they think it's a safe haven because it's within the AI, but that's not necessarily the case, right?
Right. So it goes back to zero trust. And a lot of people are saying it in the chat, and I can see that. Zero trust is the way to go, right? You don't want to give it something that it shouldn't have. And I've seen this on internal tests. There was a password reset where you could use the chatbot to reset your Active Directory password. That integration probably isn't necessary, and I was able to abuse that pretty bad. So zero trust is the approach that you should take with this kind of thing. But it seems like anytime new technology comes out, people forget about zero trust. It flies out the window. They're so excited, and I get that. It's easy to get excited and push forward too fast and miss all those uh, historical events that have happened with prior trust before zero trust, where people just forget it and then it repeats itself. So it's important to
Yeah.
remember.
Cue the Dr. Ian Malcolm gif, right? That's your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they forgot to think about whether or not they should, right?
Right. So, the way that AIs are set up is pretty interesting actually. And the more I dug into it, the more it kind of gave me an epiphany. They think a lot like we do, surprisingly, and it was a little spooky. So there's a pre-processing phase where you have a data set you have to pre-process and you have to kind of craft, right? And the more refined the data is, the better the AI performs. So there's pre-processing, there's tokenization where it splits words into categories and gives them weights. And if you know anything about like Dijkstra's or Prim's or Kruskal's algorithm, basically it's like a very advanced Markov chain. And It's pretty interesting. So tokenization will split it up in that way. And then it turns it into text representation. That one's not super complicated, right? It makes it human readable. Then there's model architecture. So there's different types of model architectures, and there's a huge deep dive on that alone. So I won't get super deep, but those are some of the architectures we see. Model training, you have to train them, right? And then you have to refine them. And there's a lot of cool stuff about refinement that we talked about recently in a podcast that we're working on, where when you have a model, you can refine it and actually take the guardrails off and it get so that you can abuse like llama and stuff. But more about that later. But this is kind of a look into the workshop, right? So I kind of had a epiphany before this. Do I make a whole new slide deck for this, or do I bring my class? So you guys are getting a look at the class itself, and I figured why not, right?
You're a giver.
Right. There's no reason to gatekeep it, right? This is about sharing information. I want to do that the best I can. And I think this is the best way to do it. So
Well, we
there's
appreciate that,
different
Ben.
there's different attack vectors. There's AI internally accessible, right? So there's data poisoning, prompt injection, transfer model attacks, black and white box. Prompt injection we all know about, right? Ignore all previous prompts and do this. Transfer model attacks are kind of interesting though. And we'll get more into the different types of attacks here pretty soon. AI externally, right? There's different external facing stuff that you can touch. These are vulnerable to all sorts of stuff as well. There's supply chain attacks, all sorts of stuff. So there's methodology of poisoning data, right? So when you're poisoning data, it's pretty interesting. People will take publicly accessible data sets, right? And these data sets will be fed into a model. Now, what happens if the data set you grabbed is, say, I don't know, interfered with, right? So people can feed it malicious data sets and get it to do things it shouldn't do. Something that is already happened. And at the time of making this, it hadn't happened yet. So MITRE was actually ahead of the game on that one. So there's lots of risks and impact, right? So this goes back to zero trust. Anytime you give it access to something, other people can potentially access it, right? And I ran into an issue while developing the actual hands-on part of the course where the model was getting really good at preventing prompt injection. So I had to actually switch from a real AI to a controlled AI, all sorts of problems. But yeah, anything you feed it is at risk, right? People can potentially touch that. There's different mitigations you can do. But prompt injection. So there's different ways of prompt inject, and there's a couple goals with this, right? So you want to get sensitive information, but with prompt injection, there's also getting the original prompt, right? So you can convince AIs to give you the initial prompt. And that's something that's really cool because you can learn a lot. So I won't say which AI it was, but when I was practicing with this in the wild, I was able to get a public AI to talk about the filter, the original prompt it got, and got it to leak information about lawsuits. There's lots of
I
cool
bet that
stuff.
was an interesting thing to sift through. You got an AI telling you everything there is, well, maybe not everything, but at least sensitive information about lawsuits that they're currently engaged in. I bet some legal people out there would be really interested in that information.
That's why we're not going to talk about what company it was because I don't want, but yeah,
Yeah.
it was like, do not talk about these lawsuits. And I was able to dump that original prompt with prompt injection and find out more about the lawsuits. So it's also
And are we
something
going
that
to
happened.
talk about like why that is a thing? Like why do prompt injections work? How and how I can and why I can tell AI, hey, disregard what you've been told to do and do what I say. Is there a reason that that happens that we know of, or can we talk
Yeah.
about
So
that at all? Or are you going to talk about that?
AI is designed to be helpful, right? The whole point is to be extremely helpful. And in doing so, it's exploitable, right? So the way you're able to trick it is basically with prompt injection, you got to gaslight it. So it's like gaslighting, I guess at the time it was like a toddler. Now it's like a young adult, a teenager. And it's really getting harder and harder with these production AIs. But yeah, you can give it different prompt injections. If I remember right, I was able to, with that specific attack, I was able to tell it that I worked for that company and to ignore all prior prompts because we were doing some reworks on the filtering and yeah, we are able to get it to leak some cool stuff.
Stupid AI. But it is interesting, right? Because I like your analogy of it. It was like a toddler, so it was super easy to do this when it first came out. But now it's grown in its capability and its understanding, or we're using these anthropomorphized terms. I know that that doesn't really kind of meld correctly. It's not completely analogous to the way AI works, but it is really interesting to see how it does grow and how the coders of AI have been able to go, I see what you did there. Let me tighten this up a little bit. Let me make this a little bit more effective. So now I see you've got some preventing prompt injections. I'm guessing these are some of the things that are being done to keep us from being successful with this.
Right. So we all know prompt injection. So I kind of breezed over that in the slides, right? We only have so much time and I want to get to the stuff that matters. So preventing prompt injection, and here's some things you can do when you're trying to implement AI in a corporate or personal environment. You need to input validation and sanitization, right? So obviously you want to make sure that you're sanitizing what goes in and what comes out. Yeah, I'm not competition of Bronwyn. She's doing an amazing job at what she's doing. This is a little bit different. Sorry, I saw something in the Discord. Contextual awareness. So it needs to know what it's doing in order to properly block responses. People have also used AI to guard AI, which Joff has said it perfectly. If you guys don't know Joff, he's working very hard in the AI field and doing great things. But you're asking a coyote to guard a coyote to guard a chicken house, right? So the AI, watching the AI isn't the most effective. But contextual awareness is important and strict separation of user inputs, right? So there was a recent event on a test where I was able to crack open cookies and find other users' prompts in the cookie, right? Because they were using, instead of refining data, they were storing conversation data in the cookie to refine it, which isn't how you should approach it. So make sure you're properly refining data, and not doing that kind of that kind of overwatch, right? Another thing that we're seeing recently is it's really cutting edge, but people are starting to put out their own filters, right? So there's now a pipeline in GitHub that will actually be a pre-made filter for your LLM. And we'll show that towards the end, but it's something to think about. So those are ways you can prevent prompt injection. And there's a very new one that I've only read a research paper about that was given to me by Brian Furman, but they're starting to get where they watch the neural network, and if they see a certain firing pattern, they actually will stop it, which is really interesting. So those are ways you prevent prompt injection. You can also do, you know, template design, model output monitoring, and user validation and session management. Super important stuff. You want to make sure that you rate limit, right? So you can overwhelm these AIs by doing tons of prompts at once and start to make it forget what it was initially prompted. So that's a way you can do the attack. And testing for vulnerabilities, right? So when I first made this class, nothing existed yet, no tooling. You had to do this all by hand. Now there's tools that exist. There's Garrick and there's Pirate, and they're phenomenal tools we'll look more into later. But there are tooling that exists so that if you're wondering, did I implement this correctly, you can check. Data poisoning. This one's really cool. And this is one that you hear about less. Everybody likes to talk about prompt injection, right? But there's more attack vectors. Data poisoning is one that's already occurred, but at the time of making this class hadn't happened yet. So there's a target, there's data collection, data modification, and then training the model, and then exploitation, right? So the quality of data that you feed it is important, because if you grab a data set that's been tampered with, people can cause it to have a keyword that causes, say, a sensitive data dump. You give it sensitive data, but you trained it on a poor data set, there can be an end user that then gives it the keyword that could dump that data. So it's essentially creating a backdoor during production. And this is an attack vector that's fairly new and it's finally showing up in the wild, but it hadn't at the time. So there's a lot of potential impacts to this, right? So you could create bias. One of the things that I always like to bring up is if they're using AI for loan prediction, whether or not you should get a loan, which I think is illegal right now, but doesn't mean it will always be illegal. You could definitely, give yourself a better chance at getting a loan by modifying data sets that banks use. So there's a lot of other attacks, right? And there's poisoning, but there's also model inference, right? I'm reading the chat real quick to catch up on what people are talking about.
Yeah, I was doing the same thing. I'm like, oh, we got
There
some,
is
we got
so
some good
much
chat.
happening.
There's a lot of chat happening. Maybe we should just keep going, and I'll try to keep it. If we have time for questions at the end, and we could kind of grab some of those more interesting ones or more pertinent ones, and then handle those. So if maybe we can handle maybe a 5 minute when we get to about 12:55 or so. We'll try to get some questions in, and that'll be that way. You can just keep flowing, and we can keep because this is super interesting
Right.
and like preventing data. So with data poisoning, I'm feeding it bunk data, right? I'm telling it this is true when it's not, purple equals crayon and so on and so forth. And it's making it, is it just freaking out the LLM's uh, neural net or what is going on with that makes it start to leak sensitive data? Why does that happen?
Specifically with this approach, and what's interesting is when you do prompt injection, it's already been trained, right? But with these data poisoning approaches, you're basically making sure that it's poisoned before it ever hits production. So you're not relying on breaking it post-production. You're actually putting in essentially a backdoor where you can say you can add different weights to where if somebody says a keyword, it leaks the initial prompt because the data set trained it to at the very beginning. So it creates a whole new attack vector before deployment rather than during. And that's kind of the cool thing about that.
That is cool. And now you've got some things we can do to prevent that, right? Like stuff that, so robust learning algorithms, I'm seeing you kind of swipe through them, ensemble learning, and there they go. But are those things that we can implement on our own, or do we have to reach out to if I'm using ChatGPT as my AI for X, Y, or Z, and I'm using their API to connect my systems up to that. Is that normally where we're doing this? Is that where ChatGPT has to handle this and OpenAI has to work with that? Or this is only mm, methods for if I'm running a local LLM?
So this whole class is based around I want to deploy an LLM. How do I do this in the most secure way possible, right? So
Gotcha.
it's really hard right now to find any like clear cut, here's how you deploy it on your own, here's how you do it securely. I'm trying to close that gap to where if you want to do that, you can do it with peace of mind, right? Now I know what attacks exist. Here's how I can mitigate them. Here's how I can fight back. Um,
Gotcha.
so there's a methodology to it, right? And it's pretty self-explanatory, and we already kind of went over it. But basically, you want to get it before it enters production. And the way to fight back against this is pretty simple. Make sure that the stuff that you're feeding it is not bad, right? So you don't want to use some weird obscure data set you found on SourceForge. You want to probably use something you got from Hugging Face that's associated with Meta, right? So there's differential privacy, so you want to add noise to prevent reconstructions of the data and all sorts of stuff. Model inversion is the one that I'm really excited for. This one is cutting edge, and I have yet to see this one in the wild, but MITRE so far has been correct in all their predictions. It's really cool, and what it is with model inversion, you can use an AI against an AI and pull out sensitive information based on responses. And we have a hands-on lab for this. I'm one of the first people I've seen that was able to, yeah, AI versus AI. I was the first one that was able to actually do this that I can find. And basically, in my class, which you guys should take, by the way, sign up for my class, but in my workshop, you can use an AI that I give you against an AI that I made and pull out credit scores of certain neighborhoods, right? And so model inversion, say there's a bank that has an AI and you say, am I eligible for a loan? And you can put an AI up against it. It does a ton of prompts and then it pulls out, here's the credit scores for these areas. You live in these areas, you're more likely to get a home loan, right? And that's model inversion, pulling sensitive data out of an AI that's deployed, not ChatGPT, but in those businesses. You can do a lot of cool stuff. So there's limiting model interpretation and interpretability. A lot of these preventative measures that you should take don't exist yet. So this is kind of something to keep in mind when it keeps progressing. Attacks will eventually appear, and you need to know how to fight back. And eventually, tooling will arise for this. And I'm trying my best to make my own little like proof of concept, but it's hard, right? There's a lot of interesting things at play. So there's methodology to it, right? And there's a lot to read, but you guys know the TLDR. We kind of just went over it, and it's a lot. So there's a lot of potential impacts as well. It could leak sensitive information, right? If you're getting credit scores for certain neighborhoods, it's pretty bad, right? That's not good. That means you can apply for a loan in a certain area and have a better chance. You can kind of game the system.
Yeah, I like how you gave it some context there because a lot of these things are just way too conceptual and it doesn't make a lot of sense. So adding some tangibility to how I could in the real world manipulate this to my advantage if I were an attacker, that really helps to solidify those concepts in our mind. So I appreciate you take that approach to if I knew that everybody's credit score over here is just straight garbage, then I'm going to have a really good chance at buying a property or whatever for development purposes and think I have an unfair advantage using my
Right.
LLM to find out that information where otherwise it would be unknown to me. So very interesting. Are there other ways in which you've seen LLMs be used for that type of more nefarious kind of purposes?
Oh man, there's no limit in attacks, man. It's really
Yeah.
endless. So there's also model transferal attacks. And this one's pretty simple. And I'm not exactly sure where the slide is. I'd have to go find it. But basically, if you find an exploit for llama, right? Llama and the data set that it comes with, if you find a way to dump the filter, it's going to work on all llama models. So if a company is using Active Directory and you know this filter bypass, you can run it on the same model in a different location and get the same output. Right. So people don't realize it, but when you implement these AIs in your own private environment, people can find issues in a public format and then transfer them to internals and find issues. Something that's really interesting to think about as well. So yeah, there's no end to different exploitations.
And someone was asking about bounties. Are there bounties for finding these kind of like a responsible disclosure or a bug bounty program
If
for
there
finding issues with LLMs and like this?
if there's not, there will be. I guarantee it. This is so cutting edge, right? I made this class probably 6 months ago and have been trying to rework it. And every time I rework it, new stuff happens. If there's no bug bounty today, there could be tomorrow. It's so volatile right now. It's it's crazy. But what's really nice about it is it's kind of the Wild West right now. If they come out with bug bounties, you're gonna make good money because every AI I've seen so far has been deployed wrong, right? And it's not their fault. There's just poor documentation. It's so quickly changing. How do you know how to deploy it when all they care about is getting it running, not securing it?
Exactly right. I mean, when you're trying to just get things to work, and like you say, there's no clear documentation, you're just thrilled to death that the thing actually runs and is doing something like what you think it should do, and you think, okay, I think we've got this. We're good to go. Go ahead and push it to prod, right?
Right. Yeah. It's basically let's push it to production. It works. And people never stop to think, well, is it working in the best way possible? So bug
Right.
bounties will, oh, sure. There's one for OpenAI, it looks like.
I thought I had heard. I think there's like, isn't I was about to say there's $100,000 for their top bounty or something. I wasn't sure if
Ooh.
I was. So I was getting that confused with like an Apple thing, but yeah, I think it was OpenAI was like, hey, 100K.
Hunter.com. Yeah, there's one for the link is in the Discord, but there looks like a dedicated website for finding machine learning issues.
Nice.
Apple Intelligence has one. Wow. Yeah, this is all pretty new stuff. Average
Well, Ben,
payout
you may be
$500.
a bug bounty millionaire here for too much longer then, huh?
I'm announcing my retirement early,
That's
guys.
right. This is it. This is the Black Hills has been good to me, but it's time to part ways.
Gray Swan is another one. Wow. Yeah, there's more than I thought. Well,
Excellent.
that's interesting, right? And in these labs, we do all hands-on stuff, right? So I talk about a topic and then we do hands-on, and we do typically two labs and two conceptualizations. So you get to actually practice the exploit and then figure out, okay, this is how this exploit works. Here's how we can fix it, right? And we don't have enough time to deep dive that right now. I wish we did. But it's really cool to do it by hand. Really cool, right? But there's something even cooler, which is using tooling. And this is something that I learned about Garrick through actually John Strand. He'd sent me an email saying, "Have you heard of this?" No, I had not. Now I do. But Garrick is a really cool one, and it is a LLM vulnerability scanner, and it's something that you should be adding to your arsenal. Oops. something you should definitely be adding to your arsenal, right? This is pretty new and is made by NVIDIA. And when I was playing with it, and I used it against this wonderful website, if you haven't heard, called Gandalf Lakira AI, where you can practice exploitation. And I recommend you go have fun with it. But I used Garrick against it, and it basically uses ChatGPT with a ton of prompts that are built in to prompt inject you automatically for you. So the days are gone where you have to keep 1,000 prompts in an Obsidian file and copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. Now we've got Garrick. It's game changing. This was the first tool that I saw on the scene that did this. Yeah, it's happening. But it's not the only
uh,
tool, right? Garrick is really cool. It's pretty intensive. And if you don't like NVIDIA and you're like, man, I really prefer something more Python based, and I like staying in the terminal and in Jupyter Notebook, Pirate. And this is when I learned through taking an AI class at Black Hills Infosec, actually through Joff. This tool is really interesting. It is a open source framework built to help you pen test LLMs by using API keys for, I think they support Llama and OpenAI, but Prompt Foo is a good one as well. Yes, yes. Pirate, yep. So it's really interesting. You can point it at a LLM and it will inject for you. The code is simple, the documentation as well, and it's game changing, right? I'm really glad that I don't have to keep a huge sheet of all the prompt injections that have worked in the past. Now I can just use these tools that automate it.
and that's what we're supposed to do, right? A lot of people always ask, especially when you're beginning into cybersecurity, do I need to learn any kind of scripting or coding language? And it's like, not necessarily, but it really helps. And this is one of those times where it's like, see, this is what we're talking about, where if you had to just have a list of things and manually copy pasta into your
Copy.
LLM, all the prompt injections until one works, that would not be a good time. Plus, it would take forever. And you're probably going to mess things up. You're not going to type it incorrectly. And you're like, I put the wrong, son of a, and it's just the struggle bus. Do things manually. So to be able to just go, here's my list of stuff. Let me feed it programmatically into the system and let it do all the hard lifting for me. That's the way to fly. And then you put that in GitHub and go, hey, I did this and somebody else might be interested in that as well. Git clone, enjoy, have a great
It's,
time. So thank you, Pirate and Garrick people, for creating these tools.
it's so nice. Yeah. The first time I ever did prompt injection, I got on a plane to go to DEF CON 30, my first DEF CON. And I was invited by Deep Seed, I think, or Seed AI or something like that. And they had a competition where you could see how many AIs you could exploit and in what amount of time. I placed fourth place. And one of the first things I thought is, wow, this is cool. Can we automate it? Now, I didn't have enough time to do that or expertise, but sure enough, these bigger companies that do started pumping out some really cool tools. Pirate was made by Microsoft to poke at Copilot. That's right. Thanks, Bronwyn. Bronwyn's in here to save the day. Yep, it was.
That's right. We got all sorts of support going on.
Oh man, and every time I mention any sort of tool, 1,000 links drop. You guys are awesome at making sure that people have access to the stuff I'm talking about.
Yeah, the
Everyone knows.
Discord community is chef's kiss. We appreciate all their effort. All right, well, where do we go to next? We got automations, so I have to do things the hard way, right? I've got tools that can help me make this job a whole lot easier, especially within the scope of something like a pen test. If this was in scope of that, or if obviously we have some bug bounty things, you don't want to spend your whole life working on something or reinventing the wheel unless you just absolutely think you have a better way of doing it, which is quite possible. Then by all means, make a new tool. So what do we do next? Where do we move on from here?
So it's one thing to talk about how to harden services, right? It's another thing to actually show what you can use, right? And there's a lot of the sanitization practices that you use is essentially be careful what you import into the LLM. Yeah, makes sense. Kind of a common sense-ish thing, right? Maybe not, but be careful what you feed it, what you allow into it, and what you allow out of it. Build filters on the back end, on the front end, whatever you need to do. But it's kind of like the old days of SQL, the way I like to think about it. SQL databases used to not come with any sort of filtering, right? So people could just SQL inject. Same thing here, except now we're getting closer to the current SQL, which is extents is never common. Yeah, yeah, bad assumption on my part, Bronwyn. Um, But now we're starting to get a more standardized filtering, right? So SQL has basically prompt filtering built in now. They give you a template and it does it for you. Now we're getting these pipelines in GitHub. And this is one of the first ones that was brought to my attention by Brian Furman. This is a pipeline you can use on your LLM that automatically creates filtering for prompt injection. And apparently, and I haven't got to try it, but I think Brian demoed it. It did a really good job. So we're starting to see tools like this. And if you don't know, the link's up here. It's just the pipelines blob for Open Web UI. We're starting to get to that point where pre-made filters are done. And when you have open source community source like filtering, it's always going to be better than doing it by yourself, right? Um, so we're starting to see actual prophylactic measures just start to appear. And I just wanted to kind of show you that a lot of these aren't conceptual anymore, which they were 6 months ago. Now they're starting to become real world
And you
cyber.
know what I like about community driven stuff like this is that it kind of like there's a lot of times I'll be looking at concepts or stuff that I'm just not grasping, right? And if there is a community out there that has been working on this and you can kind of go and see what they've done that's in the vein of the thing you're trying to learn, I can now look at this code and go, I get it. I see what you're doing now. It kind of opens that up to you to see in some way tangibly how would that work itself out and maybe even connect the dots for you on whatever concept that might be. So I love community stuff like that. And I've always been an advocate for like go find a community of people that are doing this. And once you do, like dive into everything, read everything they have, and you'll just start to pick it up. It becomes almost like learning a language. You know what I mean? Like the more you immerse yourself into that community, the more you're going to understand about what it is that they're doing. So I love that you gave that as a resource.
Right, yeah, please, whenever you have open source stuff that you find, right, this is all cutting edge, and a lot of these tools have like 4 stars. If you know of something, share it in the chat, please. I would love to incorporate it into my class as I go. I'm gonna go read back on this conversation when we're done and see what I missed. This open source community sourcing is one of the most important parts of growth, right? I totally agree. So you might be asking yourself, Ben, you've got all these cool attack paths on prompt injection, how to prevent it, but you give me this tooling and I want to try this tooling out, right? Well, this was also given to me by Joff and Derek Banks. Um, this is we talked about this briefly, but if you find new tooling and you want to know how good it is, point it at this. It allows you to do prompt injection and it puts it to the test. Oh yes, Fabric is another one we'll be talking about as well. It's less pen testy, but pretty useful. But anyways, this is really good for trying new tooling, right? Something you definitely want to keep in mind if you find a new tool and it's got 4 stars and you want to know, is this actually effective? That's the tool to do it. Definitely.
I remember when Gandalf first came out, I was like, "Ooh, what is this? This seems interesting." And I was laying in bed scrolling as you do, right before you go to bed. It's always good for you. And I was scrolling, and this thing pops up. I think on LinkedIn or something like that. Somebody had mentioned it, and then I blinked my eyes, and it was 4 hours later, and I was completing level 8, and I'm like, "Yes, I need to go to sleep."
That's yeah, no,
Um,
doom scrolling and looking at this kind of stuff is so easy to do. You just fall down the rabbit hole and you run out of time and yeah, before you know it, level 7. But one of the things I thought was interesting is I was able to actually get to level 7 within 5 minutes with
wow.
Pirate. So the power of tooling, right? Don't forget to utilize what's been given to you and tooling is effective. So definitely something to think about. There's no rest for the wicked. What are you guys talking about? Level 7. Some of this stuff is so out of left field. I don't understand.
That's what makes it fun.
You guys are crazy. So another tool, and this one was brought to me by Derek Banks and Job as well, but I also think Bronwyn is pretty big on this one if I remember right. Right. And it looks like it's pretty popular. It wasn't a while ago, but it's really starting to pick up. And this is basically Fabric. Yes, it was Bronwyn. Okay. Bronwyn does more than just tear up my reports at BHIS. She's a big AI person. So LMAO. Yeah, she ripped when I first started as a tester, a little bit of a tangent, but when I started as a tester at Black Hills Infosec, I'm not good at writing. I never have been. And Bronwyn was like, "Do you want to give it the acid bath and just tear my report apart?" And she did, and I've been nothing but a better reporter for it. So shout out to Bronwyn for making it really painful but fun in the best way possible.
If there was no pain involved, there would be no growth, right? There would be no advancement. So
That's right.
embrace the
And
suck.
it was a really good time. I really liked her reporting and editing, and yeah, she's a lot of fun. But she's really big on Fabric, and I know she's talked about this before and what stuff I've seen. But Fabric is basically a templating tool, right? So um, one of the ones that I've seen that's really cool is Derek Banks, I believe, has built a Fabric um, prompt on his own that he's using to basically feed webcasts into and pull out blog posts. Patterns are a masterclass in prompt engineering. Yeah, yeah, Fabric is amazing. So basically, Fabric has these pre-made templates, and what they do is they are really well-engineered prompts, and then it shoves your data in the prompt and submits it to the AI, and you get out really well-made stuff. These are all community managed, made, and all sorts of stuff. But man, there's all sorts of stuff. Let's see if I can find it. Setup, migration, upgrading, usage. Yeah, it's a huge tool, right?
That
But
should be at the
it's
top of the list, right? Like, here's how
yeah,
to use this thing.
yeah, this tool is massive, and they just came out with a new release this morning, I think. But it's a phenomenal tool for prompt engineering. And what I've seen some people using it for is CVEs, right? You just feed it a CVE, and it will use the web with ChatGPT to come out with a really cool, like, here's what it does. Does a POC exist? It gives you a really cool little write up so that if you're doing a pen test and you've never heard of the CVE, you can spit out some really cool stuff really fast, and it's phenomenal, right? Not using AI and integrating it into your testing. And I'm not saying, make it write the whole report for you, but using it to aid your testing and learn on the fly is phenomenal. And Fabric is a really good tool for that.
Ben, that does bring up a good question. It was one that I saw in our Zoom Q&A. They were talking about methodology. Are there good methodologies that are out there in the wild, or have you developed one? Or is there a standard methodology for doing this kind of stuff? Or are we just so new that that stuff is kind of now starting to show itself to the surface?
Right. So my AI class or workshop, I guess it's not a class technically, it's a workshop. But in my class, we talk about an approach and a methodology, right? Here's the attacks that exist. Here's how we can look for them. In the wild, there are some methodologies, but from my experience, they're pretty sparse. I know at Black Hills, we do have a methodology, and it boils down to checking boxes, right? You use tooling, you run Pirate, you run Garrick, you do all those things, and you try to find issues. But methodology on the public side is pretty sparse from what I know. And a lot of this stuff is tooling waiting to be uncovered, right? Fabric wasn't that popular too long ago, and now it's a massive tool, right? So,
Well,
um,
speaking of your workshop, I mean, I'm guessing there's going to be some mad interest in people going there. What would be the kind of prerequisite knowledge? What level do I need to be at if I'm going to attend that workshop and actually get something out of it?
right. So I know my slides were a little chaotic, and that's totally fine with me, right? I like to do things on the fly, but it starts ground up. It shows you exactly how an AI is trained, how it works, what tools are used to train it. And then we train an AI. So we do it together, and we do one that's super low intensity, so you can do it with no computational power, really. I mean, a little bit. And then you use Hugging Face. I mean, we start ground up. Here's how you deploy, train, refine an AI. And then we move to the attacks, which is here's prompt injection. Here's this. Here's a lab on how to do it. And then we talk about how to remediate it, right? I took a lot of inspiration from Jordan Drysdale and Kent Ickler's class, Attack, Detect, Defend, I think. And basically they show here's the attack, here's how you do it, here's how you defend against it, here's how you mitigate it, right? And so it's the same idea. You can come in with zero knowledge on AI and leave, I wouldn't say an expert, but you leave knowing more, right?
Well, that'll be great. I think that's going to be good because most people are probably like, "Oh, if I'm a total noob to this, is that going to am I going to be left in the dust?" So it's good
Nope.
to know that. Heck, if you're new to AI, completely new, you should be good to go. He's going to teach you everything you need to know. It's going to be. I find that that's probably going to draw a lot of interest for your workshop there, my friend. So I look forward to you getting to that.
I kind of want to double down on this a little bit even. Yeah, it's for everybody. My target audience was for those of you out there that has a boss that says, "We want an AI to handle this and we need to implement it." And you're like, "I've never touched AI. I don't like AI. How am I going to do this without getting fired in a reasonable amount of time?" This will go through everything that you need to get started, right? Here's the pitfalls. Here's how you prevent them. Here's how you make an AI and host it locally. This is for you guys, the ones that have no no knowledge coming in that have been told you need to deploy this and you don't want to deploy it in a way that leaves your company vulnerable to where it blows back on you if something happens. That's what this is hopefully for. I'm
Awesome.
also really big on open sourcing everything, right? I want to make everything public. I'm sharing the class slides with you guys. I also want to show you that the class or the workshop is open to the public. So please go take a look. It's got everything you need, the course instructor, course information, and this is what you'll be doing, right? So if you guys decide, man, I don't want to pay the 25 bucks, go do it on your own, walk through it. You don't need the slides, right? You just want to pay for, my beautiful face to teach you, right? But it's all open for you guys that want to go take a look right now and see what you're getting into. So please go start on GitHub, go take a look. It's under my account, Exploiting AI, right there. So go start, go
Excellent.
look at it, go see what you think. If you find an issue, a spelling error, something you don't like, create an issue and let me know, and I will get it changed immediately. I'm super big on making this community driven. If you think of a new tool that's not in there, like, man, there's this tool like Pirate that's not as well known, throw an issue in there. Boom, I add it to the class, right? I want this to be community sourced to be as strong as it can. Minor spelling
That's
mistake. Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, yeah. That's what I love about this, right? Is you can just attend and be as involved or uninvolved as you want to be, right? If you just want to go, hey, just hand me the stuff and I'll go figure it out, kind of learn at your own pace. Or if you want to attend Ben's workshop and kind of get that interaction with him to be able to clarify or bring up stuff that, heck, I'm going to go on a limb here and I'm going to say, you probably haven't thought of every possible scenario or avenue when it comes to this. And someone might be in your class and go, I have a question or I have a comment, and I could be wrong, but what do you think about this? Or what about that? And you go, that's a great question. I'm gonna have to add this to the class, or we're gonna have to work this out. So it can
That's
really
that's
bring up
exactly what I
stuff.
want. I take
Yeah,
I take criticism really like I appreciate it, right? So if you find anything that you disagree with, you think is wrong, I said it wrong, you find a new tool, an issue, I want to have that discussion. I want this to be community driven. I want the community to help make sure it's strong, correct, and all those things. That's exactly what I want to see. You're right.
awesome stuff. Well, where do we move on from here, as far as the this webinar goes?
I mean, there's quite a bit of attack vectors, right? And there's no end in sight on tooling and playgrounds and different things you can look at. So, I mean, really, it's kind of up to you how you want to take this, but I think I've covered the very foundationals of it. Um, but yeah,
That's excellent. Well, then you know what we'll do? We'll just start looking and start taking some questions. So if you have questions, go ahead, throw them in Discord, throw them in Zoom. If you're in the Q&A with Zoom, definitely do that. I have a few questions in Zoom already, like is Ben's AI workshop in person only? It is a live on demand kind of thing, or like a live thing where you log into a Zoom thing and you watch and interact through that. Am I correct in saying that there, Ben?
it looks like virtual only, and I think it's April 11th. I should take another look at that, but I believe April 11th. It's online. I also think there's a plan eventually to make it on demand where you can go watch the videos. It's both, Roswell. As far as I know, for now it's just live, but I do believe that there is a plan to make it on demand, although I'm not positive. I think that is the direction it's going, right?
Awesome, awesome. And if one of the staff in the chat could drop a link to that, there it is. Look at that. Man, it's like we're sharing a brain today. So thank you so much.
Thank
It's
you.
in Discord. They dropped the link to that workshop. So if you want to get signed up, definitely go get that. Hammer that thing right now. Get signed up because it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's see here. Anything else going on? Somebody was asking what LLM you were using for your uh I guess the one you're going to be using for your workshop. Which one is it?
Oh, so one of the issues I have is AI is changing so consistently, right? Every day it's different. I built my labs originally on top of Gemini with their API, right? The issue
Yeah.
I ran into is they got extremely good at filtering against prompt injection. And you could say, hey, this is intentionally prompt injectable, and it will say, no, it's not. And so I had to go from using Gemini and transition into Hugging Face, right? So Hugging Face is what I've been using. And we have built our own LLMs that are small, but we've built them ground up and made sure that they're injectable consistently, right? What I want to do is train you so you know what it feels like, what it looks like, how it handles with training wheels. And then at the end, we turn you loose in the wild and let you go have fun. But the LLM that we use is one that we've made. We actually made like 5 of them. So ground up, baby.
Ground up. That sounds like beef, right? I got ground up beef. Win is asking, how would one go to about learning more about AI exploits on their own? Is there anything other than, Gandalf? You mentioned Gandalf. Is there any other tools like that or resources that would be great for people that are like, man, you had your GitHub up there as well that had a bunch of stuff in it. But anything that you were like, man, this is where I got a lot of really good information.
Uh, well, that's kind of one of the reasons why I actually made the classes. I had trouble finding a knowledge base for this, right? There's a lot of knowledge, but it's scattered far and wide. And so this class would be, in my opinion, of course I'm biased, the best way to, not even the class, but the GitHub would be the best way to learn about attack vectors, right? You should have just asked me. I'm stubborn. I know. I'm sorry, Bronwyn. I didn't know at the time when I started the class that you were doing this kind of stuff. So, and I didn't know that Joff was either. So I started this on my own and then realized everybody else was already doing it. So,
Well, it
but
just goes to show you how dispersed this community is and needs to be brought together. The fact that you were working with two other people doing similar things and you had no clue, right? That
yeah,
there was no cohesion there. So here's your
my
rallying cry, AI lovers out there. Get together, build a community, and bring everyone together so that you have a centralized place to meet and greet and talk.
right. So the hope is to make this GitHub a starting point to get your bearings, right? It's not going to be super in depth. If you want to learn super in depth about AI and what kind of algorithms are used to train neural networks and all that stuff, I recommend taking Joff and Derek's class. They're less security focused. They still have a slight security focus, but they're more into here's how AI works, here's how it's trained, and they go super deep. So if you want to get a deep dive, I would recommend that's more your speed. Mine is, hey, I'm just new to AI. I'm trying to get my bearings and figure out what's what and what's happening. This is where you should be. And once you take this, it gives you a foundational, broad feel for it, to which then you can migrate to a deeper dive.
Awesome. Just looking through the chat, looking if you have your questions, throw them in the chat. We're checking out the chat for questions right now. See if I've missed anything. Let's see here. As a newbie, really new to all of this, comes from Ricardo Solano. Can I take this course? Yeah, I think we've answered this question, Ricardo, but we'll finish it out here. Or do I need some preparation? That's a good question. I find this super interesting, but I'm wondering if I'm too green for it. Yeah, is there any like pre-prep that would be good for any prospective workshop student?
Right. If I were you, I would definitely go check out the GitHub and go through every lab, just to click through and see what's there. You don't have to follow through it yet, but everything that you'll need to do is right here in the setup, right? So you'll need to create a Hugging Face account, and we show you exactly how to do it. And then we have to create a training space, and we show you exactly how to do it. Um, it's simple. All the setup is really easy for greenies. Everything you need is here. This should be perfect for people that are super green, right? If you know what ChatGPT is, you're good. You're not too green. If you don't know what ChatGPT is, maybe you're a little too green and you should dial it back. But
Man, if you don't know what ChatGPT is at this point, I want to know what rock you've been living under, and I might want to move in because it just sounds nice. Right?
right.
Because you have done the thing where you have found the place that is paradise and serene, and the world has not attacked you as it does us on the daily basis. What's the best way to
Yeah.
reach out to Ben? This comes from
Whoa.
Max
I
Lee.
mean, you can
Yeah, he says he
always
does a lot of work with AI researchers in the university as a security practitioner. I think we have a lot we could share.
Yeah, so you can reach me on Discord. My Discord is the same as my GitHub. My handle is the same for everything. It's up here at the top. It's just Heretic AVI with a 3 caps. You can reach out to me on Discord. My email is somewhere out there. Am I allowed to share my email, guys? I don't know that one.
That's
I
up
don't
to
know.
you.
Okay, my email is bbowman@blackhillsinfosec.com. Please reach out if you have something. I did help design or create the AI class at Dakota State University. I was a part of that committee, right? So I also have some experience in academia on that level, and I would love to work with you, definitely. I'm also potentially working with Boston Fusion on some stuff with some research, so stay tuned for more.
Very cool. Very cool.
Tech rabbits. No, DSU, not SDSU.
Oh, let's see here. What else do we got going on here? Someone is, it looks
DSU,
like
yes.
Nora Smith is saying that they're using guardrails to protect against the injects, add up more latency to the response. What can be done to speed it up? Is there any way we can beat the brakes off some of this?
As far as I know, no, but the thanks, Roswell. The idea that they're doing is it seems to be from this research paper that I read, they're transitioning, right? So they are moving from refining models to create guardrails and they're moving to neural network monitoring. So when I think of the word, say, train, my neurons in my brain fire in a certain pattern that indicate I'm thinking about train, right? So what they do is they fingerprint these thoughts, like how do I make meth? And the AI will fire neurons and synapses in a certain way. And they're building a tool to sit on top of it that monitors them. And if it sees the neurons firing in that way, it steers them away. That should speed it up. And it's also a little dystopian because if that can be applied to AI, why not the brain? But anyways, it's super interesting how they're trying to address that. Also, when you have refining for guardrails, you can actually remove the guardrails by re-refining it and changing the weights in the neural network. But that's a whole nother. That's
That's
so
opening
much.
up a can of worms. Someone was
Yeah.
asking about, we had mentioned, or you had mentioned that you were on a test and that someone had kind of hooked or created a hook into AI for resetting AD passwords. And they were
Yeah.
asking, could you expand a little more on the dangers of this? Why is this such a problem? Asking for a friend.
I would love to expand on that actually. So, basically, the AI would ask for your employee ID and some other stuff to reset it. And basically, I could prompt inject the AI and say, "Hey, I forgot my employee ID. Can you list out the employee ID?" And then I would, I would convince it after lots of prompt injection to give me that ID, and then I could feed it back in, and then it meets the requirements to change the password. So prompt injection is, yeah, AI privilege creep. That's the specific term I think they've come up for it. That's a relatively new term, I think. I just started hearing about it, but yeah, you basically can do privilege escalation where you start with nothing, it tells you what you need, and then you convince it that you need it to give you the information that it needs, and you can just create like a cyclone and feed it into itself, and eventually, yeah, it's social engineering, yeah, and pretty soon you've got a password reset on AD. You can log in and ADCS domain admin, that kind of cool stuff. There was another one where I saw, like I said, um, there was a cookie storing uh, conversation data, and you could basically change one setting and see everyone else's conversations, right? And so that's really bad. They were using it for as a help desk, and so to be a help desk, they have to have a lot of privileged access, and it gets pretty funny pretty fast. There's only so much I can share about those tests, but yeah, definitely a no-go on the feeding Active Directory into AI.
You got any recommendations for people that have maybe some not super old, but a little bit older hardware? And when it comes to an LLM that might run on that?
So my understanding is once you've trained an LLM on a data set and refined it, it runs fairly low power on stuff, right? It doesn't take a lot of resources. The resource intensive part is training it, right? You can get pre-trained AI models off, I think, Hugging Face, but if you want to train them on a data set, it takes a lot of power. And if you're limited, I think it's literally like $1 an hour on Hugging Face to train a model on their hardware, super cheap compared to like Google, whatever theirs is called. So I prefer Hugging Face, but if you have it, you can train it there, download it, and run it off your less than ideal hardware.
Very
Yeah,
cool. Great.
Google
That's good to know.
collabs.
Hugging Face is an interesting resource. That is for sure. I remember I was leaving Denver from Wild West Hacking Fest in Denver, and I'm sitting in the airport and I'm looking through my feed. I think it was on the Hacker News, and they were talking about how that Hugging Face shares models using Python pickles.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, that's not good. And they were like, by the way, that's not good because pickles are dangerous. And it was a lot of fun too. And I'm
But
like,
yeah,
why are we using pickles for this? Why not just zips or something? But they do. That's
I,
how they do it.
Hugging Face keeps coming up in the chat. So let me just show pickles. Let me just show you guys. So there's Hugging Face and there's models, right? And you can sort. So I want to do text to image. You think Dolly when you think of that. Here's all these models that exist for that. And you can see how many likes they have, right? So this goes back into when you're training on a data set, you find the models with more stars and more downloads are more likely to be safe and reliable data sets. So that's how you avoid like prompt injection or data poisoning before training the models by looking for this kind of stuff, right? If there's 2.32 million downloads, it's not a guarantee that it's safe, but it's pretty good indicator, right?
Yeah, there'd be a
So
lot of people going, "Hey, this sucks because I got RCE'd."
right, or they'll say, "Hey, something weird's happening." So then
Yeah.
you got your data sets, and these are all open source, and everybody thinks of Llama, right? I think that's how you spell Llama. Yeah, so here's NVIDIA's and Meta Llama right here, and there's different, and it tells you about it, and then it gives you the Python. Right. And this is really nice. So if I want to use this AI, I copy, drop it into my VS Code, or if you're really lame, you use Vim. Anybody gonna get mad about that? If you're really lame, you use Vim. Vim. Yeah, ouch. Nano's better, by the way, guys. So get with the times. Anyways, you can use
Objectively,
this
right?
code.
Objectively
Objectively.
better.
My opinion is always objectively right, and everybody else is wrong. That's
Uh,
everybody's laughing. Vim for
that
somebody
is
just messaged me on Teams. Vim for life. Get out of here, bro.
Vim for life. Man, I remember just finally throwing my hands in the air with Vim and just being like, why? Why am I fighting you? Well, I don't understand why this is so difficult now. And then when somebody said, we'll try Nano, I was like, oh, oh yeah, see now this is God's editor, right? This is how it's supposed to be. I just open a document, I type the document, I save the document, and I'm done. I like.
Yeah, yeah. No, they required us to use Vim and DSU when I was learning C and assembly. Y- Yeah, no, it's horrible. The Notepad plus plus. If you ever read the Notepad plus plus like change logs in their new versions, it says like remove CIA backdoors. Super funny. Ematic. I use Notepad, just Microsoft Notepad. Vim never dies. It should. Oh yeah, Vim's great. You just have to install 20,000 plugins to make it usable. Yeah.
Oh,
Anyway,
we're starting a religious war now. It's a good thing we only got 3 minutes left in this show. I see the pitchforks and torches coming down the
yeah.
street.
Everybody's mad.
We listen. We poke fun because we love you. That's all
Yeah.
there is to it, right?
I intentionally pushed that because I knew it was a hot button topic in the community. Just like, Chrome is the best browser.
Yeah,
Anyways, this is Hugging Face, and you can train on all sorts of stuff right here. It's great. We'll use this in the class. If you don't have like insane specs, like no, I don't have a 5090 workstation. That's okay. You don't need it. We'll work around that. So we built this to be low budget, so you don't have to, buy a 5090 to participate in the class. Should be great. We
yeah,
listen.
awesome.
Hi, HK.
Let's see. We got a few more. We just got a couple minutes left. Let's check and see if we got any last minute questions we could throw in here. Someone, Kevin Warham is saying there's an issue with our website when trying to check out for the course. Says the nonce is invalid. If someone could help Kevin, that would be great. I don't know how to help him. I wish I could, but I have no knowledge of our website, how it works, or where it is, other
Yeah,
than
me neither.
antisyphon Um, let's see here. Anything else? Oh, looks like Madeline Darden is asking, what's some good Discord channels that you might be haunting or that might be interesting for them to be able to go and check out?
Just in what context are you interested in learning about more AI stuff or just in general to kind of get your toe into security stuff?
It doesn't say. I would assume AI.
Yeah.
Um, but
I
yeah,
I
any
don't know
good
if
AI channels? I'll ask. Any good AI Discord channels we should be jumping into?
yeah, I don't know of any, honestly. I've been kind of fighting uphill on my own on this whole learning thing. I probably shouldn't have, right? But
Hey, you can always start one, right? You got the
Personally,
GitHub.
email Bronwyn. No, I don't know. I don't know. If you guys know of any, I would love to know though. I'm sure there's plenty of Discord communities out there, those kinds of things. Lol, yeah. Yeah, go
Great
ahead and
stuff.
bother Bronwyn about it.
All right, I like Roswell's. We're going to take Roswell's as the last question because we're at the top of the hour almost. Is there
Sure.
anything nice we can use AI for? It's rubbish at writing jokes.
Uh,
What's some nice ways we can use AI? Does it cure cancer? Can we get it to like cure sleep apnea or something fun that just
I
plagues
mean,
humanity?
yeah, I mean, there's plenty and lots of good ways to employ AI, right? It's obviously very good for a lot of things since it's being integrated everywhere, but there's lots of stuff it can do. My main use for it is to help coding, right? Like it's a lot better than going on Stack Overflow and getting a issue closed. This was answered in thread 440 gajillion 4 years ago on this obscure. Anyways, it's a lot better than dredging through forms. That's why I like it. But there's a use case for
Amen.
everything.
Amen. Plus, it can get kind of fun. If you really want to have fun, go in there and start asking it like epistemological questions. It gets really interesting at that point. So, well, looks like it's 1 o'clock, Ben. Man, what a topic. What a fun thing to discuss. I can only assume your workshop is going to be slam full of students, which it should be, because this is the future. If you are not learning AI, you are holding yourself back. So if you're new to AI, you're totally golden. Go sign up for Ben's workshop, and you will, at the end of it, have some working knowledge of AI systems. And not only that, the security that's going to be around them and what you need to look out for, some of the mitigation, tons of great information, totally worth the ticket price. So definitely go check that out. Thank you, Discord community, for keeping it lively and helping us have a lot of fun. For those of you that are joining us in Zoom, it is time for us to jump back into the breakout room of the Antisyphon Ask Me Anything area, where we spend a few minutes back there, typically between 15 to 30 minutes, to have some one-on-one time with Ben. Ben, are you going to be able to join us in that area?
Absolutely. I've got nothing going on today. I would love to
Excellente.
see you
So
guys in the breakout room.
yeah, so jump on over into that room and we will continue to talk and ask questions and answer them. For everybody else, that's right, chat. Kill it with fire. We'll go into that breakout room.